I got a comment on episode 17, which is where we created the Entity Manager. And this person was having some issues whenever they would try to remove one of the buttons using the Entity Manager. Remember, we had a property on there that was remove. And whenever they would do that, they would get, they would basically get an error. So I'm going to reproduce that here, and I'll show you what the deal is, why that doesn't work exactly right, and we'll fix it. I'm going to comment out, I want to basically, you know, we had, show you what we have is this. I want to get rid of all of these other, what we're calling entities. I want to just start with these two, start and the exit button. That's all I want. Let's make sure that that works correctly. And yes. And then I want to come down here on the on-click handler. I'm going to comment this stuff out. And actually, I'm going to get rid of that because we don't need that anymore at all. And I'm going to say button dot move. Now, let's see what happens when we do this. If I click the exit button, it goes away. Click the start button, it goes away. Exactly what we want. So what's the problem? Well, let's run it again. This time, I'll remove the start button. And we get this error. Attempt to index local E, a nil value. And this is in Lua53 in function update. So we'll go over here and look at that. So we have this. Now, as you can see, whenever I was removing an entity, I would remove that entity, and then, of course, when you remove something from a table that has stuff in front of it, the remove will squash those back together, and then whatever was at that index will go away and will be replaced by the thing that was above it, which means that you would skip out if I didn't do this, if I didn't subtract that index from I, then it would skip over that one that was in front of the thing I just removed. Hopefully that's kind of hard to describe. But anyway, needless to say, that was why I was doing this. But turns out this doesn't work. And I'll show you. Let's see. Let me turn on debugging. And let's do this. Let's print. Let's print a loop variable here. So we'll print I right here. And then I'm going to print, we'll print our decremented value. So hopefully this will, so we'll print this whenever we come in here and remove. And actually, let's just do this. This will even show it better. Even better. I'm going to put this down here. We're just going to decrement I every time. So in theory, this should give us an infinite loop, right? Because we're decrementing I and we're just holding it at the same value. But in reality, that doesn't happen. So in Lua, when you have a for loop like this and you have the loop variable, which is in our case I, if you modify it, you can modify it within that particular loop iteration, but once it gets back to here, apparently it knows what it was and it's completely reset. So those modifications do not, they don't work they don't actually modify this variable permanently, which is why this code that I had here was giving us an error, because it doesn't actually modify this I. So in Lua, unlike other languages where you can fiddle with this loop variable, in Lua you can't. You can, but the changes get reset every next iteration of the loop. So it completely ignores any changes that you make. So with that, we're going to have to fix this, and to do that, we'll be able to remove that. And this is something that I thought about doing before, but just due to the way that some of the layers were done, I didn't do it this way. But we're going to do it this way. So in order to get rid of this problem and to not have to decrease I whenever we remove something from the table, all we have to do is start from the end of the table and then just remove that way. So because whenever we start from the end of the table and we go down into the table that way and remove something, that will not affect the next index of what we're looking for. So I will not have to change because we're not having to squish them down. So we'll do for I equals the length of the entities array, and we'll say to 1, and then we'll minus 1 step, so that means it decrements every time. And now let's make sure that that works. So we're still getting the print, and if I click start button this time, it removes it, no problem. Exit removes it. Let's do it in the other way. I just lost my window, sorry about that. So let's do it. Let's click exit first and remove that one first. So everything is working good. Now there's one other thing that we want to look at and make sure of, and that is the way that the labels or the entities are added as far as what's in front of what. So I want to take the start button and the exit button, and let's make them overlap a little bit. So in this instance, the exit button should indeed overlap the start button, and that looks fine. But now let's make sure that everything else works. So if we take the start button and we change the layer of the start button, let's change it to layer 2. Now the start button should be on top of the exit button, and it is, as you can see here. So that seems to be working just fine. If we take our exit button and we say layer 3, yeah, so then now it's back on top. So the first thing added, this is I believe that the default way that we want to do it. The first thing added is going to be the thing that'll be in the bottom, even though it's on the same layer. Hopefully that makes sense. So the first thing you add in a layer will be, if everything else is on the same layer, the last thing you add on that layer should be the thing that's drawn on the top, or the thing that's drawn last. And we can see that that looks like that's what's happening here. That looks fine. So I think let's undo all of the other things that we have done here, and we'll put everything back like it should be, and I think we'll be good to go, except for one other thing, and that is something else that I had noticed, which was this enabled. What we want to do is, if the entity that we try to add here doesn't have an enabled property, then we want to set that to true. That's not exactly what this does. What we want to do here instead, so it's kind of a bug. So we want to say, well, if entity.enabled equals nil, and in other words, if it's undefined, then this is going to set entity.enabled to true. Make sense? Otherwise, if it's not nil, then we'll need to do something like this. And that will allow our entities, so that we don't have to always add enabled to our entities that we try to add here. But whenever we use the entity manager and add an entity to the manager, it will do that for us. And I believe that's pretty much it. This is a pretty short one, actually. Trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to say about any of this other stuff. But our start, exit, so our entity manager should be much better in that regard. And yeah, I think that's good for today. And you should let me know down in the comments if you want to see these, basically these bug fixes. I try not to make any changes to the code unless I do it in the videos. I don't know, I just feel like it's a little bit better to I don't know, I feel like it's easier and it's more transparent for you guys if when I make a change to the code, you get to see it in the video, as opposed to me fixing bugs off camera and then all of a sudden things work that maybe didn't work before for you, and you're like, what's going on? So let me know in the comments if that's the desired thing, would be to make sure that all of these bugs are actually fixed and I do videos about them and stuff, or if you'd rather me just fix them and then talk about them and then we just move on to other things. So anyway, thanks for watching this one, and we'll see you next time.